There is a forgotten book, older than most of the Bibles you have ever held, that does something strange. It does not simply tell the story of Eden. It tries, quietly, to place that garden inside a map of the entire world. Why would an ancient writer feel the need to do that? Why locate paradise on a chart of nations, mountains, and dividing rivers, as though Eden were not a memory, but a place the world itself was arranged around? To understand the answer, we have to begin with the story almost everyone thinks they already know. The story of a garden in the east and of the people who were sent away from it. In the opening chapters of Genesis, the world is young and the world is small. God plants a garden in Eden in the east. From it flows a single river, which divides and becomes four. Their names are spoken almost as if the writer expected you to know them. The Pishon, the Gihon, the Tigris, the Euphrates. Two of those rivers we can still find on a modern map. Two of them we cannot. And then, almost as quickly as it appears, the garden is closed. A man and a woman are sent out. A blade of fire is set at the entrance. And from that moment on, Eden becomes the great, unanswered question of sacred memory. Where exactly was it imagined to be? For most readers, that question is left hanging. Genesis offers a direction, a handful of names, and then silence. But Genesis was not the only book the ancient world wrote about these events. Among the writings preserved by the community at Qumran, hidden in the cliffs above the Dead Sea, were fragments of a text that had nearly vanished from Western memory. A text the early scribes called simply the Book of Jubilees. Some called it Little Genesis because it walks the same ground. Creation, Eden, the flood, the patriarchs, the journey out of Egypt. But it walks that ground in a different way. Where Genesis tells, Jubilees arranges. It counts, it divides, it assigns. Time is measured in cycles of 7, in jubilees of 49 years. Land is portioned out. Generations are ordered with a careful, almost architectural precision. It reads less like a story being remembered and more like a story being mapped. And inside that map, Eden is given a place. Not a coordinate, not a treasure mark, a place within a sacred order. This matters because it tells us something easy to miss about how ancient readers thought. They did not always treat sacred history as a vague, mythic mist hanging behind the present. For the writer of Jubilees, and for the community that copied him, the early world had shape. It had directions, it had boundaries, it had a center, and it had edges, and the distance between them mattered. This is what scholars have come to call sacred geography. The conviction that the holy is not floating somewhere beyond the world, but is woven into specific mountains, specific rivers, specific high places that a faithful eye is meant to recognize. And it is into this kind of geography that Jubilees quietly inserts the garden. Eden is not a lost paradise drifting outside of history. In Jubilees, Eden is part of an inheritance, part of a division of lands. When the world is parceled out among the sons of Noah, when the nations are scattered, when the holy mountains are named, Eden is named with them. It is set into the same frame, counted in the same accounting. That is the hidden promise of this strange little book. Not a buried code, not a forbidden secret, something quieter and in some ways stranger. An ancient mind insisting that paradise belonged to the same world we still walk. A world that could be oriented, a world that could be measured, a world in which, if you knew how the ancients had drawn their lines, you could begin to see why certain mountains, certain rivers, certain horizons were never ordinary. And once Eden becomes part of a larger sacred geography, the real mystery is no longer where the garden was. It is why ancient readers felt the world itself had to be mapped around it. To understand why, we have to step inside the world the Book of Jubilees actually describes. Because Jubilees is not simply retelling Genesis, it is arranging it. In its pages, sacred history is bound to the land itself. Events do not float in some symbolic distance. They occur on specific mountains, beside specific rivers, within specific borders that the text takes great care to define. After the flood, Jubilees describes the earth being divided among the sons of Noah. Each portion is laid out almost like a deed, with edges, directions, and landmarks. Shem receives the central lands, the holy middle of the world. Ham receives the south. Japheth receives the north. These divisions are not casual. They establish lines of inheritance that carry moral weight. Who belongs where? Which peoples descend from which ancestor? Which territory is sacred ground and which lies outside the covenant? In this vision, geography becomes a form of memory. The land remembers who walked it, who built upon it, and who was promised it. To know the map is to know the story, and to know the story is to know one's place inside it. So when Jubilees places Eden, Sinai, and Zion along a sacred axis, it is not drawing a treasure map. It is constructing a structured world. A world in which holiness has coordinates, and inheritance has edges, and the past is not a legend, but a landscape. To the modern reader, this can feel strange. We tend to separate sacred story from physical terrain. But for the writers and readers of Jubilees, that separation would have made no sense at all. Sacred geography mattered because the ancient world was understood as ordered. Mountains were not simply high ground. They were thresholds, places where heaven leaned closer to earth. Rivers were not only water, they were boundaries, sources, lines of descent. Eastward orientation carried meaning of its own. To face the east was to face the rising light, the direction of beginnings, the direction in which Eden was placed. Movement east or west across the text was rarely neutral. It traced a spiritual geometry. Ancestry, too, was mapped onto land. To know where a people lived was to know where they came from, and to know the covenant they stood inside or outside of. Identity was not abstract, it had a location. In a world like this, memory could not float. It needed terrain to rest upon. The mountain where a vision occurred, the river crossed in deliverance, the garden lost at the beginning. Each anchored the story to something a person could imagine standing on. This is the soil in which Jubilees grew. A culture that needed its holiest moments to have addresses, because address was how meaning endured. And this idea proved remarkably durable. Long after Jubilees fell out of the mainstream canon in much of the West, its way of seeing the world quietly persisted. Later readers, in monasteries, in Ethiopian highland churches, in scattered communities preserving older traditions, kept hold of something more than the text itself. They kept hold of a worldview. A worldview in which the earth was not morally blank, in which directions had weight, and certain places carried more sanctity than others, and the whole of creation was arranged around a center that mattered. Even readers who never encountered Jubilees directly inherited fragments of this imagination through liturgy, through art, through the maps drawn in medieval scriptoria, where Eden sat at the top of the world and Jerusalem at its heart. What survived was not a secret. It was a habit of vision. a way of looking at land and seeing more than land. So we should be honest about what Jubilees is and what it is not. It is not a hidden atlas. It is not a solved map. No one can take its descriptions, walk into the mountains, and uncover the gates of Eden. The skeptical reading is also the truest reading. Jubilees is a work of theological imagination. It shows us how an ancient community wove together land, time, holiness, and identity into a single design. Its geography is literary. Its borders are spiritual. Its mountains rise as much in the mind as on any terrain. And that is not a weakness of the text. It is the point of the text. Which brings us back to the title and to the question we began with. If there is a lost map inside the Book of Jubilees, what exactly was lost? Not a location, not a buried garden waiting to be rediscovered. What was lost is harder to recover than coordinates. It is a way of seeing, a worldview in which Eden stood at the center of an ordered sacred landscape, and every river, mountain, and border around it carried meaning that pointed back toward that center. The map was never lost because it led to a place. It was lost because it preserved a way of seeing the world that history almost forgot.